On the night of August 17, 2005, a coffee shop in Provo, Utah, was buzzing with energy. On stage was Parallax Band, a local rock group made up of talented college students. The crowd was loving it. At the heart of the band were 21-year-old Jennifer, the gifted guitarist, and her boyfriend, 24-year-old Blake, the band's lead singer. They were joined by 28-year-old Scott and the youngest member, 18-year-old Ariel. They were more than just bandmates. They were a tight-knit family, bound by their shared passion for music. In the audience that night were two of their closest friends, 26-year-old Joseph and 21-year-old Steve, cheering them on. The performance was a huge success. The final chord rang out to a wave of applause, and the band, high on adrenaline, stepped off the stage. To celebrate, the four musicians and their two friends headed to a nearby restaurant. The vibrant energy from the show carried over to their table. As they talked and laughed, Jennifer, a natural adventurer, suddenly changed the subject. She leaned in and asked if anyone had ever heard of a place nearby called Gollum's Cave. Someone immediately piped up, "You mean from the Lord of the Rings?" Jennifer shook her head with a mysterious smile. "No," she said, "there's a real one, and it's not far from here at all." Steve, the other adventurer in the group, grinned. He knew exactly what she was talking about. The others were captivated, urging her to explain. Jennifer told them about a place on nearby Y Mountain, inside an unmarked cave. She described a hidden chamber, deep within the mountain, that could only be reached by diving through an underwater passage. She confessed that she'd tried to find it once before with other friends but had to turn back because of the icy water and creeping fear of the unknown. She'd been obsessed with going back ever since. The table erupted with excitement. But Steve took the conversation a step further. He told them Gollum's Cave was very real because he'd actually been there. Everyone fell silent, leaning in to hear his story. Steve described the journey. The cold water, the narrow passages, and finally, the critical point, a small pool of water at the end of a tunnel. To get to Gollum's Cave, he explained, you had to take a deep breath and swim through a submerged, 15-foot-long passage, following a guide rope. He added a word of caution, telling them about an explorer who nearly died in that same tunnel. The man had kicked up so much silt from the bottom that the water became a blinding, muddy soup. Disoriented, he'd slammed his head on the rock ceiling before managing to grab the guide rope and pull himself back out, gasping for air. But to a group of young, thrill-seeking friends, the story wasn't a warning. It was a challenge. The fear was part of the appeal. Jennifer's eyes lit up. "Let's go," she proposed. "Let's go tonight." The idea was infectious. It was a perfect, spontaneous adventure. But when Steve glanced at his watch, he saw it was already past midnight. He had work the next day and had to decline. His departure didn't dampen the group's enthusiasm. The remaining five, Jennifer, Blake, Scott, Ariel, and Joseph, were determined. They borrowed 2 flashlights and some candles from the restaurant owner and set off for Y Mountain. By the time they started their search, it was the dead of night. The mountain was dark and silent, except for the chirping of insects and the sound of the wind whispering through the trees. With Jennifer leading the way from memory, they scoured the rocky hillside, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Finally, around 3 a.m., they found it. A dark, narrow slit in the rock, almost completely hidden by vines and bushes. This was the entrance to the unnamed cave. A cool, damp breeze carrying the scent of wet earth flowed out, chilling their skin. One by one, they squeezed through the tight opening. Inside, the cave was even darker than the night they'd left behind. The air was heavy and cold. They couldn't stand upright. They had to crouch, wading through ankle-deep, frigid water. As they moved deeper, the ceiling got lower and the water got higher, forcing them to crawl on their hands and knees, soaking their clothes. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a fork in the path. Following Steve's directions, they took the western tunnel. The air grew thicker, more humid, and then they saw it. At the end of the passage was a small pool of water, just as he'd described. A rope was tied to a rock on their side, its other end disappearing into the murky depths. They had found the entrance to Gollum's Cave. They were ecstatic, but as they prepared to go, Joseph hesitated. The journey so far had drained him, and the thought of plunging into that dark water filled him with a sudden, overwhelming dread. He told the others he couldn't go on. The group was a little disappointed but understood. They agreed he would wait for them back at the main entrance while the four of them went ahead. Jennifer went first. She took a deep breath, grabbed the guide rope, and slipped beneath the surface. One by one, Blake, Scott, and Ariel followed her into the darkness, until Joseph was left alone in silence. A few moments later, he felt a tug on the rope, the signal that they had made it through safely. It was 4:30 a.m. Relieved, but feeling claustrophobic in the damp air, Joseph began the long crawl back to the surface. He emerged from the cave just as the first hint of dawn was breaking the sky. Exhausted, he sat down on a nearby rock to wait for his friends, breathing in the fresh morning air. He waited and waited. The sun climbed higher, but the cave remained silent. A knot of anxiety tightened in his stomach. At 5:45 a.m., after 45 minutes of waiting, he pulled out his phone and called Steve, waking him up. He frantically asked how long a trip into Gollum's cave should take. Steve, suddenly wide awake, told him it shouldn't take long at all. The inner chamber was small. There was nowhere else to go. He said they should have been out by now. Hearing the alarm in Steve's voice, Joseph's fear turned to panic. He called other friends with caving experience, and they all told him the same thing: call for help. At 6:30 a.m., Joseph dialed 911. When rescue teams from the Provo police and fire departments arrived, they were stunned. They had never even known this cave existed. Guided by Joseph, a team entered the cave, making their way to the underwater passage. The guide rope was still there, taut. They pulled on it, but there was no response from the other side. Without proper dive gear, they couldn't risk entering the submerged tunnel. A new plan was formed. They would pump the water out of the passage while simultaneously pumping fresh oxygen into the chamber beyond, in case the friends were trapped and running out of air. The pumps roared to life. At 9:45 a.m., the water level had dropped by about a foot, and then they saw her. A young woman's face emerged from the water. She was facing the entrance, just inches from safety, but she hadn't made it. The rescuers pulled her out, but it was too late. Outside, Joseph saw them carry her out and broke down. It was 21-year-old Jennifer. An hour later, at 10:45 a.m., the bodies of the other three, Blake, Scott, and Ariel, were recovered from the tunnel. They were all found behind Jennifer, all facing the exit, as if they had been desperately trying to get out. The medical examiner confirmed they had all drowned. When rescuers finally passed through the now-drained tunnel, they found the small, cone-shaped chamber on the other side. Inside, they found several candles, some of which had been burned. The oxygen level in the sealed chamber, even after an hour of pumping fresh air in, was still dangerously low at 19%. The pieces of the tragedy fell into place. The four friends had successfully made it into Gollum's cave. Thrilled with their discovery, they lit candles to see better, not realizing they were in a sealed-off space. As they talked and explored, the candles and their own breathing consumed the limited oxygen, replacing it with carbon dioxide. Soon, they would have started feeling the effects of hypoxia: dizziness, confusion, and shortness of breath. Realizing they were in danger, they decided to leave. Jennifer likely went first, but the water, which had been clear on their way in, was now a murky cloud of silt they had stirred up. In the blinding water, disoriented and oxygen-starved, she must have panicked. She lost her grip on the guide rope and became trapped. The others, also suffering from hypoxia and desperate to escape, followed her into the tunnel, only to find their path blocked. In the narrow, dark passage, with no way to turn around and their lungs screaming for air, they met the same tragic fate, one after another. That same afternoon, authorities sealed the entrance to the unnamed cave with concrete, ensuring no one could ever enter again. As the cement was drying, grieving friends came to the site, pressing their hands into the surface, leaving a permanent, silent memorial to the four vibrant young lives that were lost to a night of adventure that went terribly wrong.